We're going to move now to the series of 3 panels that run through the course of the day, and we're going to kick off with our diversity panel. And I am delighted to introduce my colleague, Mark. Everybody talks about everybody being the hardest working person in mountain biking, but if you've got to run the IMBA Europe office, Mark Torsis has to be one of the hardest working people in mountain biking, and he's going to carry on working by chairing the first panel, so moderating the first panel. So Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much for your kind words, Kevin. And don't forget that I got a really hard-working board helping me out as well. I'm really glad that so many people joined this session. There's a huge ambition in front of us while we've been drafting this new strategy. And one of the things that we shortly mentioned, or Thomas shortly mentioned, is diversity and inclusion. And it's the first time that that topic has been addressed by IMBA Europe in its working plans or strategies. And there's still a long way to go, I think. We need to learn, we need to listen to all the experts before we're gonna be prepared to take any good actions. But we have a really good panel here. There's a long way to go, as I've said. Like, the current data on diversity are not, and inclusion are not that encouraging. We've seen a bit of a shift in terms of the number of women participating in our sports, but on all other aspects, I think there's still a long way to go. And diversity and inclusion has different faces, I would say. It's not only about ethnicity, it's also about adapted sports. It's about job opportunities in the industry. Which brings me to our panelists for today. Really happy to have them here, all with a completely different background. The first one to introduce is Aneela McKenna, the founder of Mòr Diversity, a diversity, inclusion, and well-being consultancy business. But she's been in the game for a long time. She's also an advisor for the Scottish government on diversity and inclusion. Is a mountain bike guide, is an instructor, runs a tour operator called Go West Scotland, and has experience in the cycling sector for more than 10 years, and even as a diversity and inclusion and well-being professional for more than 20 years. So we are delighted to have her on this panel. Our second panelist is from Sweden, from one of our member organizations, Cykelfrämjandet. Back to the slide. Yeah, sorry for that. Stefan Lonngren works as a project manager at Cykelfrämjandet, the Swedish national cycling advocacy organization. And he's a mountain bike rider, guide, coach, trail builder himself. He does it all. And he's currently leading a new trail cycling project aimed at young people with ADHD and autism. And the aim of that project is to lower the threshold and increase the opportunities for outdoor life and physical activity for this group. And last but definitely not least, and a very welcome for Brooke Hopper, who is based in the United States. So this is a really early morning session for her. Thank you very much for that. Brooke is the global marketing manager of Lift Cycling, which is part of Giant Bicycles, a true leader, a women leadership role in the bicycle industry. So really keen to have her on this panel. In her role, she oversees all the product marketing, sports marketing, digital marketing, communications, and public relations. So happy to have you all here. What we're going to do, we're going to run this panel by, I'll start asking you with some questions, and the audience, the viewers, can submit their questions in the chat as well. We have a few minutes for that at the end to go to those kind of questions. I'd like to start with Aneela. Like, sports in general have a unique ability to bring people together from all walks of life. But why do you think has the mountain bike community never been able, or not as good, to do the same? And why is our culture or image, or maybe the composition of people that practice mountain biking, such a big obstacle for marginalized groups to join our sport?
Thank you for having me. Yes, it's a good question. You know, You have to think about mountain biking and where mountain biking has come from. It's a relatively early sport, isn't it? It's come from the late 70s, 80s, and predominantly men have been in that sport. And it's only been in the last 5 years, really, from my own experience, that we've seen more women come into the industry, women being represented within mountain biking. So we're starting to see some progress, aren't we? But, you know, in the last year, we have really seen a real shift in mountain biking. I would say there's been an awakening, and that's just the start of the journey, isn't it? It's the start of a journey to say, yes, we have a problem. Yes, we know that there are people less privileged to participate in mountain biking. So how can we get those groups accessible? How can we make mountain biking accessible to them? And culture of mountain biking, I think one of the things about the culture, there's a perception that it's hard, it's tough, it's competitive, it's gnarly, it's fast. And, you know, it's not like that. You know, we're lots of, you know, as we're talking about, you know, being different types of mountain bikers. And there needs to be an entry point into it that we all need to be supportive of and celebrating as well. And I think the way, in terms of media and brands and how it's represented, it's become this kind of hard sport. So we need to break that down. We need to break down and tackle this perception so we can open it up to all communities and think about aspects like affordability. You know, we don't all have to have the best bike. We don't have to wear the best clothes. And we could also think about access as well. You know, the host talked about e-bikes, thinking about where do trails start from geographically, how accessible are they to all users of bikes? And the other thing is around motivation as well. You know, how are people motivated to get into the sport? How, if you don't have a family member or a friend, how do you know that it's there for you? So yes, there is a good, we're in a good place at this moment in mountain biking, and even the fact that we're having this conversation today is superb. Yeah, so we do have to work together to change the narrative.
Yes. Talking about a threshold or being or considered as a hard sport, how would that be for you, Stefan, with working with a group of kids having ADHD or autism? Could you tell a little bit more about that project and where it comes from, and how hard it is, or maybe not, to get those people into the sports, and what kind of approach you've chosen?
Yeah. Okay, this project is aimed at young people with neurodevelopmental disorders such as ADHD and autism. It's government funded for 3 years. The inspiration for the project came from the Outright Foundation in the US, but mainly from a project that colleagues of mine heard about at the 2019 summit, IMBA Summit in Denmark. It's in Scotland, where mountain biking has been used for mental health. Super interesting. I think I saw the project manager was here in the chat, Graham. Yeah, and there's a lot of research behind this, why this can be good for this specific focus group. Research has shown that mountain biking can actually be even better than other forms of exercise. There are 3 factors behind this. I'll go through them briefly. It's kind of interesting, at least to me. To get your heart rate up, always good for anyone. But if you also do that in nature, there's other research showing that you can measure how the blood pressure drops and stuff like that. It's a great place to take stressed out people living in cities. Just in the woods, good things happen. So, and the third aspect is that you have to focus. If you're riding a mountain bike on trails in the woods, there's a small element of risk, right? For example, if you compare it to someone playing soccer, if you lose your concentration playing soccer, all you do is you're just a person standing on grass. Not much could happen, right? But if you lose your concentration riding a mountain bike on single track, there can be consequences. So that forces the brain to focus, and that in turn makes for a lot of good things to happen in the brain, and the positive effects of that, they can stay on for days after a good ride, and it can also make help medication work better. Yeah, so we started in 2020 was the first year, and wasn't that a fantastic year to start anything at all? It was tough. No one wanted to talk to me about anything at all. And then quite unexpectedly, all bikes sold out. But I got a hold of a few bikes in late September, and we arranged 3 group rides, which was like a nice little pre-taste of what this project could be. Then Swedish winter hit hard, and I focused on finding more bikes, and I did. I've bought 33 mountain bikes for the projects. Really good. They haven't all been delivered, obviously, waiting on about half of them. But I have enough to be up and riding with a couple of groups, and yeah, super fun. Well received, of course, among kids and parents and people working with them. We're having a lot of fun.
So the best has yet to come, I guess. Mentioning like the lack of bikes, which brings us to the bicycle industry, Brooke. You're in a pretty unique position, I think. You know, as working at a brand like Live Cycling, completely focused on women's cycling. What are the current strategies that Live Cycling has in place to encourage better diversity and inclusion practices within the brand? What have you done so far?
Well, that's a great question, and thanks for having me. Can you guys hear me okay? Great. Well, Live is a part of the giant brand portfolio, but we are a standalone brand. And so at Live, we put women first in everything that we do. And you know, in a world where women are often not considered in the research, design, and development phase of a lot of products that we use every day, we think it's really important to create a community for women in a sport and an industry that's dominated by men. As a brand that's focused on women, I've noticed it's kind of a constant fight to get a seat at the table. And I come from the outdoor industry. I worked for the North Face on their marketing team for years. And to me, the industry is very far behind the rest of the world. It is very predominantly oriented to white men. And that is both within the industry, within the organizations, and on the trails. So I think there's a lot of work to do to create more community and to support women in a sport that really hasn't invested in them like they have in men. We have a lot of programs that we work on to accomplish this, and we know that it's a journey. You know, it's definitely not a sprint. It's a marathon, and we know that we need to do better and that we need to show better representation and to create a more inclusive industry that welcomes everyone. And to an earlier point, that is also it isn't only gender. It's also looking holistically at what being inclusive means. And what we have focused on is really aligning on supporting different programs and just having the conversation in everything that we do. But when you think about my role, I am on a women's team in the bike industry. I work for women. I have women working for me, and I bet that we're the only all women team in any brand in the world. And it's what I learned this past year that was really poignant for me is that I have a white woman lens through which I see the world. And while I feel that I have to be fighting for women because, again, the industry and the sport is simply not a welcoming place for women, we also have to really look and see how we can join and welcome more communities of color. And I think, I'll give you just a quote from one of our team writers. She wrote this essay, and I thought this really kind of says it all about our women first philosophy. And it's, you can't fight for women and not fight for Black women, trans women, disabled women, or any of the other intersections where anyone who identifies as a woman resides. I'm often asked, do women need to ride a women-specific bike? And I say, of course not. But we are constantly asked to justify our existence and told that what we're doing isn't necessary. And what I really struggle with is the fact that it's usually white men trying to tell women what they should or should not be riding. And so as a brand that's makes bikes and gear for women, it's, I'm constantly fighting just to even be in a shop or to have to be taken seriously. And I think that's really unfortunate, especially if you look at where the opportunities arise. And where we stand is really, it's like more choices is better for everyone. And we know that not all women are the same. So not all women are going to fit our bikes. And there are a lot of great bikes in the industry. At the end of the day, we just want to encourage and enable more women to get on the trail, on the road, and to actually see themselves through the programs, the athletes, the ambassadors, and all of, really, it's a holistic brand strategy that we're focused on. And again, we continue to learn because, that's, one pedal stroke at a time, as I like to say.
Yeah. Aneela, is there also a bit of a problem that we don't yet see the value of a more diverse and inclusive mountain bike community? And if so, what should we do about it, and how can we, promote it? And what is the value of having a more inclusive mountain bike community?
Just listening to the other speakers and what Stefan and Brooke were saying there, I think particularly Stefan was talking about the health benefits of mountain biking, and just to think about making that accessible to everyone. At the moment, that opportunity, that happiness that we get from mountain biking and being in nature is only accessible to certain groups. It's exclusive. We mountain bikers do mountain biking because we connect to nature, we connect to the social aspect, we connect to mental health. But the value of it is those that are in most privileged positions, those that are vulnerable in society, those that are excluded or experience discrimination, can get that same opportunity too. So we all as individuals have to take a responsibility to see how can we give that to everybody. Not one group shouldn't exclusively benefit from that. And once you actually start to bring diversity into the community, it can bring so much more enriched experience, enriched perspectives. It means that you learn about other lived experience. And then that means those people around the table are different voices, and therefore those different voices represent those different issues. And so that in itself can be a wonderful thing. And what that ultimately can do in terms of value to businesses and brands and organizations, it can increase markets as well. Because there is, we look at this like a moral issue, and it isn't absolutely a moral issue, but some people don't get that. And what I'm trying to do with my work as well, working with businesses as brands, is actually there's a business benefit to all of this as well, in the sense you can increase your markets, you can actually bring people from different communities into the sport. And ultimately, if you have those different voices, you're going to improve performance, you're going to have better creativity and innovation. So that is the value at all levels, right from the top all the way down to community. And if we open it up and see more people like ourselves, then like Brooke says, you have that choice. You have a choice. You don't have to just participate in a women-only event, or you can go into the mixed event. You can go into a women-only event. It's your choice. But that's, you know, ultimately Brooke's work is helping facilitate that. It's enabling women to come into that space to then make sure that that space is equal to everyone. So what can we do, Mark? What can we do? One thing I would say is use the trickle effect. And that trickle effect, and I'm starting to see it because of how many people write to me every day asking me for my advice on diversity and inclusion. And that's about setting standards, questioning how are you building diversity of thinking into your work. And if you're doing that at national level, companies will then start to think, okay, well, I've got certain standards to meet. I'm going to meet them. Companies then have to employ their photographers, their designers, their creative artists. And they're coming to me now saying, how do we get more people of color? How do we get those different voices? So you can start to see that trickle effect. And what that ultimately does is that changes behavior, and it changes behavior in a really positive way. So we can transform our thinking. That's what we have to do. We have to take some time, just take a step back, reflect, and think about those voices that we want to hear. And if we can do that through our storytelling, through you know, the way in which we communicate, the way in which we say that we are welcome to all, wow, what a wonderful place mountain biking will be. Because the community is wonderful as it is. We just need to bring everyone else into it.
Yeah. Brooke, could we say that we could hold businesses accountable and ask them to support a more welcome and diverse workforce, for instance, at this moment? I'm just hoping that we're not going to lose the kind of momentum that we have on this topic, and that like in 2 years we're back to the old situation. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with Aneela that it's the trickle down, or there needs to be support from the top. I believe that the bike industry is very old school. They operate, you know, in a very, I guess, you know, top-down approach. And I have seen most success coming from the grassroots, and I'm really supporting and encouraging their own companies to create a more inclusive workforce. Where I think we struggle in the bike industry really is in our pipeline. Again, there's not a lot of people of color who are or women, or you know, they don't see themselves in the bike industry because we don't market to them. I'll get a bicycle magazine and I'll go cover to cover to see if I can find a woman, and often I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so you know, I think that what we need to do is look at it, you know, from all levels, which is, you know, where are we looking to hire people? Are we just going to the same place and saying, oh, no people of color are applying, so no women are applying, so we're going to hire another man? And to me, it's like, well, maybe we need to look at our strategy for recruiting. Maybe we need to go to historically Black colleges, to go to employee or job fairs, you know, things that we can do systemically that will have really great impact on our industry in the long term. And again, where we sit, it's all about having more choices and seeing yourself where, like, in the industry. And right now, you know, it's definitely not happening. You know, I have to just bring up that the majority of people on this call are white, and also just acknowledging that that's unfortunate that we don't have more people of color represented here. Same with different leadership conferences. How do we encourage people of color, women, to want to you know, be in the industry? Because frankly, it's a hostile place, and I'm grateful because I get to work with women, and I think that the industry is starting to see that diversity of thought is actually going to be what we have to do for our industry to succeed. And then we just need to welcome everyone to join us on our bikes, but we can't afford not to, especially with the, cycling boom among youth, women, and people of color this past year. I hope that breaking trail for women and people of color as a brand will help us to continue to, just take one step at a time. And we understand it's a journey, and it's not, sometimes you can stall out, but we need to keep moving forward. And that's a great point. Like, how do we keep this momentum going? It's really about again, continuing to welcome these new riders once the world opens again, to come back and to support them through digital content, how-to videos, especially for women, when a bike shop isn't necessarily a safe space to enter, nor do they get treated in a way that's nice or kind, or the problem is, in my opinion, it starts from the riders, and if people of color and women don't see themselves represented, or people like themselves represented, they're not going to feel like they're part of the community, or that they're welcome in the community. So I kind of went a little circular off topic there, but hopefully some of those nuggets will land.
No problem. It's such an interesting topic, and it's just a shame that we don't have enough time to do this for one more hour. I was just thinking, like, we've talked a bit about behavior, culture, identity, and how people construct identities, and all kinds of thresholds. What I've noticed is when I'm looking at urban infrastructure like pump tracks, I see a total different world, with kids of all kinds of backgrounds and girls playing on a pump track. Is that something like having infrastructure really close by? Is that something that will help us to work on diversity and inclusion? It's a general question for all of you. How do you see that? Will it help? Like, one of our kind of key phrases is more trails close to home, because that could be a threshold for some people as well. But like these kids, there seems to be much less of an issue of diversity and inclusion at that level, and in a sort of urban setting. How do you feel about that? Maybe Stefan, we haven't heard too much of you. How do you perceive that?
Well, yeah, that would make a tremendous difference if there were pump tracks and easier trails, beginner trails close to where people live, so they're not. I mean, that's also excluding people is if you have to take the car with your bike to a designated mountain bike area. So we're trying to work on that here in Sweden. I mean, it doesn't take much to make a small piece of forest a really nice playground for beginners. So yeah, we're working on it here.
I think that the urban park is that transition phase to mountain biking, because many communities, like many ethnic minority communities, are living the urban spaces, and therefore may not even know that the countryside exists where mountain biking is. I mean, I grew up in the city. I never went to the countryside until I was in my 20s. I only got introduced to cycling when I was in my 20s. My local green space was my local park. So if there were the opportunity for people like myself, that, you know, geographical location is important, then, you know, if I had the opportunity to use a bike park or an urban, you know, pump track, that could be my transition to mountain biking. And I think that would be a great way of bringing in kids from different communities to participate in mountain biking for the generations, you know, for the future.
Yeah, thank you very much. We are running a little bit late. I got a signal. I wasn't watching time. Too good enough. Sorry for that.
Can I make a quick comment on identity? Because I think it's really important. And I had a great learning over the last year and a half with some of my athletes. I'm always asking them to send me, where they're seeing better representation from brands, whether it's social or in marketing materials. And as a brand for women, one of my riders sent me a specialized, I think it was specialized social post that showed a Black man. And I had this like really big, awakening, and realized that she sees herself as Black first and then a woman second. So all of the work that we do to fight for women isn't going to be resonant if we're not also fighting for women of color or the trans community. There's so much we can do to help with the identity question and help people see themselves, with us and part of us. But I had a great realization that, my white woman lens was not seeing that not all women identify first as a woman, and not all content will resonate as such.
Thank you for that final statement, Brooke. We're definitely going to be coming back with you. I've seen some questions in the chat as well. There's a lot of interest in Stefan's program as well, and how to grow that, I think, in different places. We will provide all the people that have been joining this session with follow-up links. So you can expect more questions in your inbox, Stefan, later on. For now on, I just want to thank all the panelists for the great contribution. And we need to move on to Kevin, who's going to do the moderation of the second panel. Thank you all for your contribution, and back to Kevin.
Thanks to Mark, and thanks to that panel for really setting the standard for, I think, not only sharing their knowledge, but provoking tough questions. And that's really, that's why we're here. So much appreciated by all of us.